So to begin, I've learned a lot from this class. This has been a great learning experience for me. Um, I wouldn't want to take this class with anyone except Professor Onwar. Just as something as basic as my writing, this class has changed that. There are things like from Everybody Writes, it's probably backwards, but from Everybody Writes, there's things that I thought I couldn't do at all because of previous English professors. But in this class, this book especially has taught me things that I should go and do. For example, never start a sentence with and, but, or because. That's like always been like in the back of my mind. I can't like do anything like that because it just was wrong, because of my old English professors. But something like this book, which I really enjoyed, by the way, I really did enjoy this book because of like how accessible and like easy to read it was, and it's just like funny. But yeah, it taught me things like just throw away some old rules that you had in the back of your mind just to make you a better writer. And another thing that I figured out or read in the book is that you should use analogies, which I think is more apt for us. Like it just would be better for the reader because of our culture today, which is how I'm going to tie it to orality and literacy. Like analogies, it just better proves your point. And in this society, or the one we have now with all the internet, sometimes you just need that analogy to prove your point rather than just throwing words at them and then hoping they understand. In orality and literacy, Professor Onmer was talking about something that I didn't realize until she started talking about it, and it said in the book, Ong focuses on like Western culture when approaching literacy, and even that small detail has made me realize that if, as a PR professional, that I shouldn't just focus on Western culture, that I should expand my my horizon, my view, and try to include my entire audience, which is to my next point, which we were also talking about, which is don't exclude any audience. Your writing should be all-encompassing. It should really not exclude anyone from what you're trying to say, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to prove. And I feel like that was like a one of the big elements that I realized, that even though if you're talking about something specific and maybe it's targeted towards a specific audience, it has to be subtle. You can't tell the audience, hey, this is not for you. You should not read it. Because you never know. Like anyone can become your target audience at any point. Another thing that this class has helped me embrace is my first draft. The thing is, before this class, or even kind of during this class, I would send in my first draft, and that would be like, that was it. My first and final draft was my first draft, or last draft. But this class has made me realize that maybe that's not the best thing, because you have to be, as a professional, you have to make sure everything's edited, make sure your grammar is on point, you have to be professional. And this class, especially, I think this is the only class really that has made me realize that I can be proud of the work I do, and I should be, because a first draft is a part of the process. And I kind of can't wait until the end, because I feel great about my product at the end. When I'm done, I'm like, I felt really proud of that. I might have made a few mistakes, but that's what this class is for, just to learn. But another aspect of this course that stood out to me were the PWPs. One of them, which the assignments are given by public relation work text and Professor Onwar, and the one that stood out to me in particular, besides the other one, is the blog post, which kind of took me out of my comfort zone, because I like to write very professionally, not professionally, but I like to sound like I'm educated, I like to use big words, I like to kind of make my sentence structure complex, and then this class introduced to me the Flesch-Kincaid grade level scale, which I hated. I hated it because it took me so long for the blog post, in particular, to kind of not dumb it down, but just simplify it, make it easier for my audience to read, because as a blog post, it can, anyone can read it. If anyone has the internet, they can read it. If it's online, they can access it. And this one was kind of difficult for me because I wrote it all out and I was good with it. I was fine. And then I forgot until the end about the Flesch-Kincaid grade level scale. And so at the end, I checked and I realized that I had a lot of editing to do. But I was kind of like proud of it, you know. I was just kind of like, oh, you know, I can do this too. It's not hard, but it was just, it brought another perspective to my mind that maybe I do kind of write not for an entire audience. You know, I could, unless like I'm writing a book, that'd be different, but for blog posts, newsletters, things like that, it's better to make sure that your audience understands what you're saying, and you have to be careful on how you say things, which leads to my next point, that everything has a double meaning. So you have to make sure that what you're putting out there is what you mean and what you want them to read. I'm also going to talk about one of the mistakes I made, which was in the very beginning, but it kind of made me more focused on my later PWPs, because I wanted to make sure I had all the information right, I had the right spellings of people, everything. But the very first one, which was a group project, I realized that I hadn't even put the right name of the company on my first PWP. And I was so embarrassed, but I'm glad that it happened in a class rather than like later on during my actual profession, because it, now in the back of my mind, I was thinking, do I have the right name? Do I have the right, like, is their job correct? Like, I want to make sure that everything's correct in my writing. And even though it was like embarrassing, because it was the name of the company, I like that now in the back of my mind. I always have like kind of that fear, even though it's just a professor saying, "Hey guys, like, what'd you do?" To me, I needed that. You know, something that we talked about in class has made me really think. And there was a question that Professor Anwar said, and it was, "Are we smarter now because we're literate? Because of our like the technology and the literacy that are kind of combined in our society now, or first world anyway, society?" And I've been thinking about that, and I think it's a double-edged sword, you know. So then I think that also impacts my writing, in that what you write, no matter how you write it, some people are just going to oppose it for different things, you know. There's so much information readily available to people that people choose to focus on one thing because there's just so much information. And rather than trying to encompass it all, they focus on that one thing that gives them comfort. And if what you're writing about goes against what they've chosen to like to incorporate into their lives, you might not get through to them, because there's just so much information out there. And as soon as you say something or write something, there could be another opposing view like 2 seconds, uploaded 2 seconds after you post it out there. And I think that as a society, I don't know if we're smarter because we're literate. I think that just means we can read more, but I don't think it makes us any smarter because of how much information there is and how difficult it is to discern what is real, what isn't. So how I would incorporate that into my writing is I would try to make sure I have facts on my side. Not on my side. I would try not to be biased, but if I'm trying to write on something that has a specific focus, I would want to make sure that I do have facts. I do, and I make sure that my sources are credible. I want to make sure other sources are credible when I'm looking at other people's writing. I want to make sure they have the right information. I want to make sure they're credible, because how I view other people's writing impacts my writing. If I just believe anything that is told or given to me, I don't think that would make me a very strong writer or a strong voice in any matter. You don't need to be literate to be on Facebook and on most social media now. And it's very mind-boggling to understand and realize that, like, the internet is our collective externalized mind and consciousness, like, for everyone to see. So because everyone just puts their thoughts out there and just puts whatever they're thinking on the internet, I think it makes it more important to have my information, my writing stand out. Um, I want to make sure to wade through and, kind of draw my audience in the way I want to. So in conclusion, I found this class to be really fun, in that it challenged my writing, but I also realized that I'm not going to love everything that I write. And I realized that with, like, the backgrounder, which is, I guess, a bad example, but I just really didn't like writing it. I really didn't. Or the biographical sketch, I didn't like that either. Even, like, it was just like information, and I realized that in the future I'm not going to love everything that I write, and I'm not going to enjoy everything, or enjoy all my subjects. But that doesn't mean that I can't write as well as I can, or the best that I can, and try to give that product to my employer, to my audience, and make sure it's the best I can do.